Okay, so we're live, and Lumi's excited to be live. Lumi, come hang out with me. Good girl. That's Lumi. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna first talk a little bit about bonding and what bonding means, and then we're going to go through some questions that I have collected from you guys, and let's go ahead and look at some of that. The first thing I have is we're going to go through some of Roger Brandis's articles on bonding and social behavior. He has two good articles on bonding that I found, and let's go ahead and look at them and see kind of the major points. Just share this, okay? And as always, feel free to ask questions throughout. I'll mostly probably see your questions on Facebook, but if you're on Patreon, I'm sure I'll see them there too. Okay, bonding in dogs. So first, bonding is, and this the funny thing is, when I was looking through these articles, is he was posting this while he was out in California doing guinea pig camp with us. So that's kind of exciting. Let's start actually with this one. Let me make sure that it's casting. Are you guys seeing this well? This is the first time I'm trying to cast my screen while live streaming. It looks like it's working pretty well. So bonding and stress. So bonding in animal behavior is a biological process in which individuals of the same or different species develop a connection. The function of bonding is to promote cooperation. And one of the things that'll come up in both these articles, and I'll post links to these articles in the descriptions, but it's that bonds are natural. They happen, okay? And a lot of times people want to, I hear this from people all the time, it's like, oh, me and my dog are really bonded. And that's technically an incorrect usage of the concept. You and your dog aren't bonded. Bonding is a process that you go through that it's continuous. You don't ever stop bonding, or you don't ever finish the process. It's something that you're always doing. Parent and offspring develop strong bonds. The thing about that is, and a lot of dog trainers have made this point, and let's not confuse this necessarily with imprinting, though it may be imprinting. I really do believe that dogs look to us as their parents, at least if the bond is formed correctly. If you have a dog from a puppy, I know this for a fact, that your dog sees you as your parents, your mother and your father, which both serve different roles to the dog. Males and females tend to develop strong bonds to help their offspring survive. That's absolutely true. And I think, I don't know this for a fact, but it's an anecdotal thing that I've experienced, which is that it seems to me that there seems to be much simpler bonding between male dog owners and female dogs, and female dog owners and male dogs. They just seem to run across that gender line. I guess they fit together in a better configuration, I guess is the way to think of it. So social animals, dogs are social animals. So bonding is a natural process. It'll inevitably happen when individuals share responsibilities. Looking to one another's eyes is only bonding for a while, but surviving together may be bonding for life. This applies to all social animals, dogs and humans included. And a really important thing there, and this article is all about bonding and stress and how stress influences bonds. One thing I got from Sue Sternberg is she talks about forming bonds is about shared experiences of joy. And I think that's super important. But on the other side, I think shared experience of stress is just as important. Roger likes to use the example of, you take two people who hate each other and you stick them out in a boat in the middle of the ocean during a storm, and they'll come back best friends for the rest of their lives. Like, profound friends, right? There, I remember hearing from old school trainer that the old school method, if you have two dogs that fought, stick them both in a crate or a barrel back then, a barrel, and roll them down a hill. If both dogs are alive at the end, they won't fight anymore. They'll be best friends. There's something about that. Increasing stress can increase bonding. It can also increase aggression. So it's not something you want to, like, just make your dog stressed out for no reason. That's not going to increase your bond. But putting yourself in stressful situations with your dog, and I think this is where nose work trials, for instance, and competing with your dog really help, because the stress that you and your dog feel when you're competing is very similar to the stress you feel when you're surviving together. And I think that's super important. Dogs are hunters, and in order to be satisfied, they need to feel like you are hunting with them. You guys need to hunt together. Super, super critical. And let's see. Bottom line, we need to be nuanced about stress. Events causing healthy stress responses are necessary for enhancing attention to details, formation of memory, the creation of bonds, and learning. Too much stress works against it. Okay? So you need to have the right balance of stress in your life. And, a lot of people want to improve their bonds with their dogs, and they don't know how. A lot of people think that bonding is the same as love, and then they're surprised when appropriate discipline increases their dog's bond with them. And it's not about withholding, it's about setting clear boundaries. Dogs and people, for that matter, are always happier when the boundaries are clearly stated and not vague. And I think when you think about bonding with people the same as dogs, you start to appreciate it's not some magical thing or a formulaic thing. Forming a bond with a person is the same as forming a bond with a dog. You spend time together, you share certain likes, certain dislikes, you go through trauma together, you're there for one another when things are bad, when things are good. That's how you bond with a person. It's also how you bond with a dog. And it's also important to recognize that, sometimes you just don't like a person, and sometimes you just don't like a dog, and sometimes a dog just doesn't like you. It's a testament to their nature that dogs tend to like people, but a lot of dogs don't. And a lot of dogs don't like specific people. Sometimes that's because of a negative experience, but sometimes that's just because, guess what? Different personalities don't work together all the time. And sometimes we need to let it go. Like, your dog doesn't have to love everybody. Your dog just has to be under control and respectful of everybody. They don't have to like everybody. We'd never expect that from another human being. We'd never expect that from another human being. But we expect it of our dogs, and that's really unfair. So let's get back to this view. So that's a little, again, I'm going to post these in the comments below so that you can see my information, these articles on bonding, which are great, great articles. And I can't figure out where I posted this on Facebook. Okay, well, it must have been posted somewhere. So that's bonding. Let's get to some of your questions. I saved up a couple of these questions from you guys. And if you're watching, let me know you're watching so I can interact with some of you guys. Did I post it on the Nosework group by accident? No. Okay, so I've got several questions, and these questions were about bonding, which is why I wanted to talk about bonding ahead of time. So this person is saying that her dog doesn't care about anyone but her. And it sounds sweet, but her significant other and other family members also live there, and her dog doesn't care about them. She doesn't want to force her dog to love people she doesn't want to, but she wants her to experience the most love and enjoyment in life. And she gets photos of her while she's at work, looking sad and forlorn, waiting at the gate. And her family has to force her to come inside, or she just lays on the concrete all day. So let me just talk about that real quick before I get into the rest of it. It's a very long question. The first thing I would say about that is you have to respect the dog's personality. And if the dog is not interested in forming bonds with other people, you can create an environment that might facilitate those bonds from developing on their own. But if the dog doesn't want to, the dog's not going to. And I don't think you should force the dog. I don't think you should be expected of the dog. And I think, whenever you expect a relationship to form between two individuals, animals, people, whatever, it doesn't work out that way. You just put them in an environment and let the bond form on its own. Now, to go on the other side, to weigh both sides together, if this sounds like a dog who's obsessively attached to you, which is not the same. Like if you bonding is on a spectrum, right, of things, it's overly bonded, maybe, right? For an animal to just lay at a concrete all day when there are other people around, that seems like an over level of attachment, which is usually coincides with a certain amount of either insecurity or possession. So it happens. Just reflect every behavior as if it were a person, right? If this were a kid or an adult who you leave and is just watching to wait for you to return, and other people in the house are like, no, this person, I'm waiting for this person to return. That would either be someone who's so insecure that they can't be like, okay, they'll be back later and I can hang out with those people, or it would be someone who's like, she's late, she shouldn't be out, she should be here. It's very possessive and domineering, which I've seen both in dogs who feel like they own their owners and dogs who feel like they will die without their owners, right? And both to me are unacceptable. I want, and that's my personal opinion. You don't have to agree with it, but my relationship with my dogs, I try to be as equal as possible. My dogs see me as family. We're equals, the same as me and Natalie view each other. With my dogs, the only difference is it's not a 50-50 relationship. It's 51-49, right? Like when I give you a command, you will absolutely respond to it and there's no questions asked. My dogs say, do I have to? And I'll say, yes, you have to. And then you have to. And that's because I have information about the world that they don't have. And like there's a car coming, or there's an animal that's going to hurt you, or that this dog isn't friendly and you need to listen to me. So I always keep that edge, but I want my dog to be self-reliant, self-confident as much as possible. So I don't set up my life to encourage an over attachment. Over attachment is an interesting word. I don't know if there's a better word to use, but that's the word that's coming to my mind. So that's the first part of that I would advise about. So now, right now she's working 10-hour shifts. So she's gone from home 12 and a half hours a day. The dog won't play with Josh unless she's home. She sleeps all day and then goes crazy when she comes home. It's exhausting to be the only source of her joy and excitement. And she says she does give her love and playtime when she comes home, but and she occasionally is taken on walks, but her significant other occasionally takes her on walks, but he has to lure her with a treat to put the leash on. And sometimes she runs around the yard evading him, so he just leaves without her. So now that is important. That's significant because that, honestly, it doesn't have anything to do with bonding as much as it has to do with control. Now, the other thing is maybe there's some, the question I would have is, is it you that wants her to bond with Josh, or is it Josh that wants her to bond with him? And sometimes that can be significant because, well, if he's coming at her with an energy of trying to make her like him, that can make the dog uncomfortable. Just like it would be for me. When someone comes on to me and they just want to be like, I want me to like you, I want you to like me, that's like off-putting, right? For most people it is. However, if it's just something you'd like to see happen, then we can probably facilitate that. One thing I would say is take a look at the DogJutsu program I have in the obedience and start having him go through the calibration program. So he's the only source of food, and it's not some kind of feeding you because I love you. Love is important, and don't get me wrong, that's something that should happen. But the most important thing is that it's about control. It's a contract. You do something for me, you get food. Okay. One thing that, a lot of dogs tend to like me for is that I'm clear of my expectations. You do this, this happens. You do this, this happens. I don't try to overstep my boundaries where I'm trying to get all lovey-dovey with the dogs. Dogs like that. They're predators. They are lovey-dovey, but they want a working relationship. I think they crave that sometimes. They crave that structure of clear boundaries. And so if your significant other is, here's the food, and you need to come to me, let me grab your collar, and then you get the food. And that would be week 1 or month 1, maybe, especially if she's evading him, is she just needs to come, let him take her collar, and he gives her some of her daily food. And if she doesn't come to him, guess what? She doesn't get it until she's hungry enough to say, okay, I'll do it for the food. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for the food. Now, over time, with that clarity of structures, you do this, this happens. You do this, that it's so consistent, the dog might actually start saying, it's not that bad. You're not a bad person. You are consistent. You give me what I need when I do what you want. It may develop into a relationship, but come at it with the goal of developing control and let the bond form on its own. Oh, he's already the main one who feeds her. So he has a lot of interaction with her. That's interesting. So it makes him feel bad that she won't hang out with him. Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't think it's something you can ask. If she doesn't want to do it, she's not going to do it. The only thing you could do is, and I know that you've already been trying this, is you are withdrawing from her slightly and ignoring her more. And the problem with that is now she's going to attempt to get your attention more, right? I think the main thing to do would be to have them do something where they're active together. Some hiking, some nose work, something like that. Something where they're out hunting together, doing that kind of activity. That might break more ground. And it might be, hard at first because she wants to be with you, and it may never happen, but that would be my advice to get that done. So there's an answer to most of that question. Let's get to the next one. So this one is about anxiety and coddling your dog during this. So when this person got their dog, it was popular not to coddle, or comfort a dog during times of fear or anxiety. And when her dog was a couple years old, she had a lesson with a dog trainer who was adamant that ignoring fear and anxiety was not the solution. She said she comforts her dog like a mother. Her reasoning was that dog would come to her and rely on her for safety and support during these times. I've been extremely confused since then about which approach is best. I tend not to comfort during these times, like fireworks. Now she's reading a couple different books. One's by the monks of New Skeet, and they advocate not comforting, just providing techniques for the dog to work through their fear and anxiety. After New Year's Eve fireworks, I'm revisiting how to approach dealing with an anxious dog, and what is my method for dealing with an anxious dog. And there, you're going to find a million different ways of dealing with this, and that's because there's a million different people. I think this is just like bonding, where it's a unique process that happens all the time. You also have to establish what your goals are. My goals are to create self-confident, self-reliant dogs who don't need me. That said, I can be there for them, but I want a dog who doesn't need me there. What happens when I'm away on a trip and it's thundering? I don't want my dog to need me there to coddle them. And there's a difference between comforting and coddling. I know it's not always clear when one ends and the other begins, but just know that I think coddling is when the dog can handle it on their own, but you're stepping in to help them anyways. Comforting is, is the dog's doing well and you're like, good job, I'm comforting you. I think with my own dogs, I tend to be less babying. Now it's partially because I'm a guy too, so guys tend not to have that nurturing instinct. And I think the male strategy and the female strategy for raising, and when I say that, what I mean is biologically, right? So a female mother animal, right? Her job is to make sure her children don't die, right? And the male strategy, his job isn't actually to make sure they don't die. His job is to make sure that they're competent and can survive in the wild, right? And so you have this constant struggle between, a kid falls down a playground, the mom wants to run over and comfort the child, and the dad's like, rub some dirt on it, right? And both are important truths about reality, and you need to learn how to emulate both of those with your dog. So there's sometimes with my dog where they do something and I'm like, hey, yeah, you're fine, relax, good job. And then there are some times where I'm like, get over it, right? And you need to use your intuition to decide which works. And you might, maybe not intuition, maybe your intuition's really bad. So instead of using intuition, try both and see which your dog responds to better, right? You're not going to kill your dog doing either one of these methods. None of these methods are hurting your dog in some way or abusive or anything like that. These are just like, I'm trying different strategies to help you overcome your fear, right? But if I'm comforting my dog all the time and they're not overcoming their fear, then I'm making the problem worse. I am standing in the way of my dog getting better. And if I'm not comforting my dog and the problem's getting worse, then I'm also making the outcome should judge which method works for you. And so I think you hear all these advice from different trainers. I think it's because every dog requires a different approach. And if you give them that, if you take each dog as an individual and listen to as many trainers as you can, so you have a lot of tools in your basket, then you're going to make the right choice for your dog. I will say that there are some people, and I see this a lot in the pet world, where it's not just, they don't just comfort the dog to help them get over their fear. They comfort because they want to comfort the dog. And in fact, I'm sure you've met these people. They have fearful dogs. They've always had fearful dogs. Their next dog's going to be fearful. Their last dog's going to be fearful. None of them ever get over their fear. That's because they don't want them to get over their fear. They want to always fulfill that role of the comforting, I'm going to protect you from life. And if that's the relationship you want with your dog, I personally feel that that's an abusive relationship to have with your dog, to keep them that way. But, if that's the relationship some people want with their dog, you just have to know, like, when someone advises you to keep comforting your dog, look at the relationships they have with their dogs. Are their dogs confident? Okay, great. Are they one of these people who are constantly keeping their dogs fearful? Well, then you might take that with a grain of salt. You might decide that's not the result I want with my dog. And, you can look at my dogs and decide, what you think about mine. Any of you can take my dog and go do a nose work search with them. They don't care about you, but they're happy to go do it. And they're happy when they come back to me, but they're not dependent on me to do certain things. So that's my advice for handling that issue. Let's see, what else? Okay, so this one's about having dogs on the bed. So there is this idea that the dog would be guarding the bed, and allowing the dog on the bed is like telling him he's in charge. And this person likes their dog on the bed, and do I believe it's detrimental? So I've been meaning to make a series about, dominance and in dogs and that kind of thing, because there's a lot of misconceptions about it. But is it bad to have your dogs on your bed? Well, we have to define what bad means first, you know, and this is the same with anxiety. It's the same with bonding. It's like, what are your goals? If you, especially if you have multiple dogs, this is more of a problem if you have multiple dogs. If you allow your dogs on your bed, then what will happen is you may create a competition for a treasured resource, which is a prized resting area. It's well known that dogs will fight over resting areas. If you haven't watched the studies on the Mexico City dump dogs and that kind of thing, just look, they fight over resting areas. And this is very, very common in the canine world. And if you create a highly prized resting area in your home, your dog may be willing to fight for that. We had my in-laws had a little dog that was very aggressive. If you tried to displace him off the couch, he would bite you. And that's a big problem. There was a resource that was created there because, you know, people wanted to sit there, and sometimes keeping the dog off of it creates it as a prized resource. So you got to be careful about that too. My dogs don't sleep on my bed, but that's only because my cat sleeps in my bed right now. My dogs have slept in my bed. I can tell you that when they're young and they're puppies, I don't have them sleep in my bed. They earn that as after training a certain amount of time and getting a certain amount done, they can sleep in the bed. I can have multiple dogs sleep in the bed with me, but I think that's partially because, again, clarity is super important. I've clearly laid out the rules, the boundaries in my house, and that has nothing to do with dominance necessarily. It just has to do with being consistent. And because I'm very consistent, my dogs, for the most part, are very comfortable with their relationships with each other, or relationships with me, and they don't feel the need to lash out or defend a certain prized sleeping area or chew toy or something like that. I don't think if you let your dog sleep in your bed, it's going to turn them into a quote unquote dominant dog. I don't think there's such a thing as a dominant dog. There's dominant behavior. Can you create an environment that facilitates dominant behavior? Yeah, you could, maybe. So you just keep an eye on it and decide for yourself. And the easy way to tell is, can you tell a dog get off? If the dog gets off, then you probably have no problem. If the dog won't get off, then you've got two solutions. One, your dog doesn't respect you, which is the one everyone jumps on. And so he says, I know what you want, but I don't want to do it. Or two, you haven't trained your dog well. So the dog's like, I don't know what you're trying to say. You're saying get off the bed? Are you saying lay down? You know, because the dog's on the couch. My family, I laugh at them all the time because the dog's on the couch and they go down. And so my dog lies down on the couch because they don't know down means down. It doesn't mean off, right? So you make sure you're clear. And I don't have a problem with dogs sleeping in the bed. Although you may be careful for the things I've already mentioned. And you may also be careful about the dog developing a dependency on that. It may not come up a resource worth guarding, but it may become, it may increase their attachedness to you, which if you want that, that's great. If you want a more self-reliant dog, maybe have them sleep in the crate every now and then. And you can balance it out by doing multiple of it. Sometimes they sleep in the crate, sometimes they sleep in the bed, sometimes they sleep in the room, but not on the bed. That's harder because then you have to keep waking up to take them off. Or you could just tie them out, which is the easy way to do it. So, there's a lot of different choices, and I don't think there's one right way to live with a dog. I think it's all up to you as long as you're consistent. So make sure you think about this before you do it. Another thing worth mentioning is a lot of times people don't think about what the problem could be in the future. So, for instance, letting the dog sleep in the bed continuously, and then suddenly you decide to have a child. And you have the child, and now you're displacing the dog out of the bed. That's going to increase the stress that's already existing in that environment, which can create problems between your dog and your child. And I really think that's one of the instances where dominant behavior does factor in. So the dog will see this little baby as displacing them off of their earned resources and feel the right to reprimand the baby. And unfortunately, the way a dog reprimands another dog is grabbing by the scruff and shaking them, which is totally harmless to another dog, but to a baby is maiming and very dangerous. So, it's something that happens more often than anybody would like to admit. But children are disproportionately injured by dogs this way. So something to think about. Really think about all the long-term consequences. That's one of the reasons everything in my house is so variable. I don't like to lock them down to any routine. The closest routine we have is that they sleep in their crates. That's about, and I can't see how that's going to go wrong, right? But even that's not a strict routine. Sometimes they don't sleep in their crates. So, yeah. I think that's it for today. I want to know from you guys, what topics are you interested in? What things do you want to learn more about? Just let me know what to make the future topics and start sending me your questions for the next time. Thank you guys. We're going to do this once a month.